In this episode, I drive across town. No, really, and sit down to talk with Tim Ohst from Sly Fox Brewing. Started as a brewpub in 1995, Sly Fox is one of Pennsylvania's oldest craft breweries. And in the quarter of a century since then, they've been pioneers in making craft lagers and canning. Do I really need to mention the goat races?
Ready, set, goat!
Welcome to No Pants During the Pandemic. Hi, I'm Kevin Brooks, and welcome to No Pants During the Pandemic. Today I'm speaking with Tim Ohst from Sly Fox Brewing Company. Hey Tim, how you doing?
Good, Kevin.
So Tim, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I'm the Director of Brewing Operations at Sly Fox Brewing Company. Been working at Sly Fox for 16 years now.
So Sly Fox is actually, it's an old brewery now at this point. Why don't you give me a little background about the brewery itself?
Sure. We've been around for 25 years now, so we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, albeit a little bit differently than we expected to, given the pandemic. The Sly Fox started out, I guess it was December of 1995 in the original location in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, where they opened up a small brew pub. It operated in that capacity for a number of years before they saw an increased demand for the beer and the product, and started selling the beer to some of the better beer bars in Philadelphia. That's kind of around the time when I came on board. I started at Sly Fox in 2004 as they were planning to open up a second location and production facility. When I started, we were ramping up and installing the brewery there and getting things going for distribution, and probably around November of that year, we opened up the second location with the restaurant and the brewery in the back half of the building. I guess we lasted there about 8 years. During that time, we grew ridiculously fast, as breweries kind of did back then. And one of the big moves we made was to start canning. Just about a year and a half to 2 years into my time there, in early 2006, we started canning. We just started out with two products at the time, our Phoenix Pale Ale and Pipeline Pils. We were really the first craft brewery in the whole Mid-Atlantic area to start canning. There weren't too many other craft breweries, at least anywhere on the East Coast, that were doing it. At the time, we definitely got a lot of, why are you putting your beer in cans? It's not like it is today, where it's just ubiquitous among craft brewers and is now the given that it's going to come in that package size.
Why was canning, not, or kind of frowned upon back then, I guess?
As a kid growing up, bottled beer definitely had that stigma of being better. I can remember even at family gatherings, my uncles all breaking out like Lowenbrau bottles, and that was like a really, really big deal to celebrate special occasion. So it just always sort of had that image. And I think a lot of people at least remembered cans from the 60s and 70s, before technology advanced to the point where every can was lined, and people recall, or at least associated, having a metal taste with cans. That had all changed long before we started canning, but I think people still had that, misconception in their minds.
Image is definitely why people were not drinking it. It was the macros that were canned.
We definitely had some challenges of educating our customers as well. But it was nice because, we had, at that point, two pubs of people to test market on. I think I was even still bartending a shift or two a week at night at that time. And anytime anyone said anything, I would just, pop open a can of Pilsner behind the bar and pour it into a glass, pour some draft in there without them noticing, and then handing it to them and tell me, all right, which one's the can, which one's the draft. That tended to quiet them down pretty quickly. And I think we've come almost completely full circle now, where it almost has to be in a can to have craft cred, and potentially even a labeled can that doesn't look quite as nice as a mass-produced printed can even.
Yeah, it's like if it's a mass-produced printed can, sometimes they're just a little too slick, and then they're like soda pop, soda to people.
Yeah, the labeled can gives you some street cred, I guess.
Seems like the only beers that kind of can get by with the bottles are like some of the funkier, the lambics and some of the other funkier saisons and whatnot.
Sure, yeah, and anything bottled condition is still, great in that format.
Everybody's working on, can conditioning, so we'll see how that goes. You're originally from New York, so how did you wind up coming down here and getting in with Sly Fox?
Kind of a strange story, and it really was just kind of happened on a whim. Post-college, I didn't really have any direct plan of I want to go on this career path or anything like that. But I did have some friends from college that were living in this area outside of Philadelphia. I actually came down here for a New Year's Eve party that a whole bunch of friends were at, one of whom had just moved down from New Hampshire. And I don't know, throughout the night, my friends kept bugging me saying, you should move here too, why don't you move here too? Little did they know, 2 weeks later, I'd be sleeping on their couch. So that's kind of how it all started. And I was, just kind of looking for any old job in the area as I sort of charted my career path for a real job. Lo and behold, that still hasn't happened. I've never gotten that real job. I literally saw, I think, in the Inquirer classifieds that a John Harvard's brewpub was opening up soon nearby. And I just went down there on a whim and got a job a few weeks before it opened as a food runner. And then it all kind of just grew from there. Within a couple of years, the guy who was the assistant brewer had left, so I applied for the position, and I guess I'd shown enough interest in the beer throughout my first couple of years there as a food runner, then server, then bartender, that I was able to get that gig and work part-time in the brewery and part-time behind the bar.
And how did you go from Harvard to Sly Fox?
I guess I actually ended up, in the interim, I worked at Flying Fish Brewing Company for about 4 years. Chris Rafferty kind of took me under my wing. He was the head brewer at that John Harvard's and showed me the ropes in brewing. And he had moved on and become the lead brewer at Flying Fish. So a couple years later, we were in contact again and they needed somebody. And I hadn't done anything in that sort of production brewing kind of realm, but I moved to a position there making wort.
Now, when you came over to Sly Fox, what did you initially do?
Initially, I was working right off the bat at the original brewpub. So I had experience from John Harvard's working on a very similar system. And I was the second employee in the brewery. The brewmaster at the time was Brian O'Reilly. He had worked at the John Harvard's in Cleveland. Through those connections, we had met, and then he had moved to Sly Fox. And he also lived in the area. We kept in touch. So that was sort of my in there. And so I was pretty comfortable working on that brewery right off the bat. So I kind of stepped right in and did a lot of the brewing, filtration, and work on that side while he was working on some of the bigger stuff for the new production facility that we were opening up in Royersford. And then I kind of quickly transitioned into a similar role there.
And then flash forward 10, 12 years and you actually replace him.
Yes, yeah. So the two of us worked together for 14 years there. Worked side by side for a really long time and definitely learned a lot from him, and I think we taught each other a lot, and now I've sort of moved into that role for the past 2+ years.
What's Sly Fox known for?
I think overall we're probably, I think we're known for making a broad swath of a lot of different types of beer and a lot of different styles. So we've always kind of had our hand in everything from bottle conditioned Belgian beers back in the day to English ales, American style ales. One thing that we're probably best known for are German style lagers. A couple of our beers that are still year round and stalwarts in our portfolio are Helles Golden Lager and Pikeland Pils. And we've been making those since day one that I started at Sly Fox. Those are the beers that we probably had the most success with in terms of getting some medals at the Great American Beer Festival, along with our Oktoberfest lager. So I think that kind of did become our niche and what we were best known for. And it fit in well in this area in Southeast PA because there's so many other great lager breweries, Stouts, Trogs, Victory. So I think those styles have always been more appreciated in this area in terms of craft beer.
Definitely with the German background, they're more appreciated here. But, all of those breweries you mentioned, though, they're all roughly that same age, 25-ish years old.
Yes, everyone was kind of coming about around the same time.
With exception of Stouts, which is just closing, the rest of them are still kicking and doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one other thing that our brewery is known for as well is our events and the unique nature of some of our events.
Like which one?
Well, we've been putting on the Bock Festival and goat races my entire tenure at Sly Fox, and it even started a couple years before that. Definitely unique in the brewing world and has also grown tremendously over the years. I think it started out with the farmer that picked up our spent grain, showing up with a handful of goats and maybe one or two others and some curious onlookers watching goats run through a parking lot. It's grown now to just a massive event to the point where we actually ended up purchasing the empty field and lot next to our brewery so that we would have additional space for that event and others, to where we've had 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 people there. I guess a number of years ago, we staked the claim to selling more Bock beers in one place than anyone else, and we haven't been challenged on that yet, so we think it might actually be true.
In the U.S. or in the world?
It very well might be the world. I mean, I'm not sure if that there's...
Germany might have given you a run for your money
They
on that
definitely
one.
have more Bock beers over there, but having 7 or 8 different Bock beer styles on tap at one time in one place is rather unique, I think.
When you guys were still at the brewpub location, the event had already gotten huge, but you had no room.
It started filling up the entire parking lot, and the other businesses in the shopping center pretty much had to close for the day. The police needed to be involved in directing traffic on Route 113, where the original location was. So it was really good that we had opened up the new space in Pottstown and had additional space, because we're able to spread things out a little bit more. More people are able to watch it and get close to the track. We've added a jumbotron so that if you're not right up by the track, you can still see everything that's going on. German dancers, the Emil Schante band playing classic German music and polka. And then for the past few years, we've added the Alex Meixner band as well, who has a more rock/polka hybrid vibe going on, so it kind of keeps the crowd going and involved throughout the day. This year, with the whole pandemic and all events having to be canceled, he teamed up with us to do a virtual online Bock festival. So we had virtual goats racing online across the screen, you know, accompanied by some great 8-bit graphics and music. But interspersed throughout that was Alex banging out some of his tunes.
All our friends will be drinking Sly Fox beer.
Just a nice way to keep things going, even though we weren't able to host the usual event this year.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was all right.
Sly Fox, Sly Fox, Sly Fox, Sly Fox.
Now, when you guys moved to your new brewery, quote unquote new, I mean, it's 8 years old.
Yeah, 8 years in now.
That was a huge jump size-wise. It allowed you guys to grow, but then also, as you were growing, it allowed you to do some work for other breweries as well with your extra capacity.
Yeah, we added a significant amount of capacity, but yes, as we moved into the new facility, we were definitely able to partner up with different people, and it's been a really interesting mix, and really challenging at times as well. On that side, the customers tend to come and go depending on their situations. Sometimes you're working with a brand new brewery who's kind of just starting out or building their own production facility. So we had one summer where we were going gangbusters for a brewery in Ohio that was about to open, but that business kind of comes in and hits hard and then goes away. It's always a constant rotation of who you're doing that work with. We've definitely had a couple guys that we've been working with for a really long time. The Brewers Art down in Baltimore was probably the second brewery that we ever did any contracting for. We're still going strong with them, making their Resurrection Ale, which has quite the following down in Baltimore.
It's funny, I think I've never had their beer from them. I've only had their beer from you.
Sure, yeah.
And contract brewing, though, is how you and I met, because we met through McKellar doing some contract brewing.
We did a whole bunch of beers over the years for McKellar. And and like a lot of people we work with, they ended up opening up a production facility out in San Diego, so they had their own capacity come on.
And then New York.
Yeah, that was really interesting as well. And having the international connection, where suddenly something would pop up and they'd have an opportunity to sell thousands of cases of beer to like SAS Airlines, and everyone really quickly, to fine tune a recipe and get ingredients in and get cans produced and bang out a good chunk of beer for them.
Sly Fox would be considered, generation one of craft brewers. Tucking those couple like Anchor and a few of the others aside that were much earlier.
May have been one of the first in Chester County after Prohibition.
So, how do you stay relevant for 25 years?
It's certainly been a challenge. We've got a few beers that we've been making steadfast throughout that entire time. But a lot of the other lineup, you do need to, mix things up and change things around. I think one way is through the seasonal beers. We don't necessarily keep that part of our lineup static. We like to change things up after a couple years and move things in and out of the lineup. And then introducing new beers and sort of updating the portfolio with the times. IPAs have certainly changed since we started brewing and started canning our Route 113 IPA, which was definitely more of that classic craft style IPA. We've even thought about removing it from our lineup at one point, but it's actually still got like a pretty strong following. There are still people out there that appreciate that more classic or even English style IPA. But obviously that spectrum of IPAs is now incredibly broad, and we're definitely look to dabble and put out different releases along those lines. So One way we've done that is through a series of beers called our Hop Project. We periodically throughout the year will do 4 or 5 different releases along that line, mix up the hops, mix up the style of IPA, and put out these releases. And we get great feedback on those from the public and from our pub patrons as well, and can kind of use that as a little R&D for coming up with some new styles.
I will say, you guys and Flying Fish and Stouts, and Victory, I guess, for that matter. So I was, at the time, living in New York City and then over into northern New Jersey. You guys were like some of the first local craft guys.
Oh, yeah.
That I was like, cool, and we're making craft lager, which early on wasn't a thing. It was like everybody wanted to be as far away from lager as possible. And then we started looking to move down here, and I noticed the trend that, at least at the time, O'Reilly Stout was like taking tap handles away from Guinness in Philadelphia, and I'm like, I think I'll like this area.
And now people are like, Sly Fox in northern New Jersey, why would we want to drink beer from a brewery that far away?
Yeah.
But yeah, and we've done some other projects as well to just kind of keep things fresh. We do a whole bunch of different one-off unique beers that don't even necessarily go out in distribution, but they're on tap at our pubs. We are now up to 5 locations, with this spot here in Malvern having opened up at the beginning of this year. So we've got an outlet to brew some batches of beer that are brand new, that we've never done before, and keep things fresh. Done some collaboration brews as well. You mentioned stouts earlier. We released a black lager with them, decided to go with sort of a classic German style lager for 2 of the more old school, I guess, breweries here in Pennsylvania that were known for their lagers. That was really well received. It was absolutely delicious. I've still got a couple cans, I think, tucked away in the back of my fridge because I was so happy with the way that one turned out. And then this year, during the pandemic, we've jumped on board with a couple of the other projects. We did our version of the Altogether IPA, which was a recipe put out there by Other Half to support people in the hospitality industry as everything shut down for the pandemic. And we've still got a little bit of our last one left, which was the Black is Beautiful beer that was also, along those same lines.
You mentioned opening this place up, and you had the other projects as well. Now this opened up in the winter.
Yeah, I think it was January of 2020.
And so, a month and a half later, it's more basically forced to shut down.
Yeah, it was definitely, certainly an interesting time with a whole lot of uncertainty. You don't really know what to expect after that. Initially, there was certainly a big spike in to-go beer, but everything else was shut down. So I think last year we had a 50-50 mix of our business being draft versus can. So that's a big chunk of your business just suddenly disappearing. But the pubs, and I'll give our pub managers a lot of credit for being able to pivot and change the format of their service and really go out of the way to do whatever was necessary to switch around and make things happen and work. I think right off the bat we saw our 2 oldest locations doing the best, where we had a loyal clientele and a whole lot of regular customers and people who were accustomed to coming there and picking up beer to go as well. So they naturally then continued to come there for their cases to go, and we were doing at least good business on that end. This location certainly hadn't had any time at all to establish that loyal local clientele. And in this area here in the Great Valley Corporate Center, we're surrounded by office buildings. So they were counting on a lot of that to drive the lunch and happy hour business, and that just completely disappeared, of course, as people were all working from home. But it's been really interesting to see as things have opened up and they've got this great outdoor space here that we're in right now, seeing the business build over the course of the summer. So I literally think last week was probably their best week yet in terms of volume of sales. And it's got a great setup here with the large garage doors that open up, so it's perfectly suited for outdoor dining, and I think people are really starting to recognize that and take advantage of it.
You guys are in a better position, I think, than like some of the really little guys, because you could toss out, some heating things out here later. You've got at least some of the finances.
And as it's been going on, we've been continuing to expand the outdoor seating and doing some work at the production facility and tasting room in Pottstown. So we've got even more capacity there. Our Wyomissing location that opened a little over a year ago, they were able to expand into some of the additional space. So they had outdoor dining right around the building, but they quickly installed a beer garden area there between themselves and the adjacent building. And so we've really been able to make use of the space in and around there to try to keep the business up as much as possible.
And now you mentioned briefly the brewery. You were about 50-50 draft versus packaged, and that changed because you lost basically all of your draft.
Yes.
So how did you guys pivot, which is sadly the word I've used way too much?
It's a lot of constant pivoting because when this first started, you just didn't know what to expect next, and when you were going to literally sell your next keg. Obviously, all the wholesalers just immediately went into sort of complete lockdown and panic mode because they're sitting on thousands and thousands of kegs from a ton of different breweries that they now have no outlet for. So no more kegs are then leaving the brewery's inventory at all. Luckily, as some limited outdoor dining started to open up, we had an outlet for some of it through our pubs. But it was definitely difficult. We, literally have beer in process and seasonal and one-off releases that were planned. So 2 different beers in particular that we were right in the midst of doing. Alex's Lemon Wheat Ale has been our summer seasonal for the past couple of years, where we partner with the Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation and donate $1 per every case sold. We were probably halfway through brewing all that beer when we suddenly said, wait a minute, there's not going to be an outlet for any of these kegs, and had to shift all of that production to cans only. And along those same lines, also had a one-off IPA that was slated to come out in April, and all of that was kind of in the works and rolling, and just quickly had to go make the decision that, all right, we got to brew this beer 6 or 7 times, and you're securing the hops and securing all the raw materials to line that up, and suddenly you're like, wait a minute, I think we were only making this 4 times. We managed to come through it really well. One of our other concerns was another beer that we were doing for the summertime, an unfiltered Keller Pils that we called Slugger, because it was primarily supposed to be sold at Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia. So that door also got slammed in our face at the exact same time. It's supposed to be a whole opening day release in conjunction with baseball. We were going to do some promos at our pubs and down at the ballpark. Quickly realized, all right, well, we can't wait for opening day now. We got to start selling this beer while it's fresh. And it was really well received. And, with the uptick in canned beer, not only did we not have any trouble moving through what we had planned to sell at the ballpark, but we actually ended up making another small batch just to keep up with the demand. That obviously turned out well, but it's just a lot of changing, suddenly realizing, all right, all those kegs sitting out there waiting to be filled aren't going to be touched for a really long time. Now we need a lot more cans, and we need a lot more labels. Luckily, we were able to, a lot of our vendors were really flexible and were able to turn things around as well to help us get us through these things.
You're not the only brewery that had to make that sudden change, so that results in, product shortages. So, you guys have had can shortage issues.
Yeah, definitely. And it's obviously, something that's sort of plaguing the entire industry, but craft breweries more so than others. It's definitely been a challenge. I don't want to say luckily, but luckily I had this experience 2 years ago where there was more demand for cans than they were able to supply. So, had a little bit of experience going through this, but really nothing like this year where overall the entire beverage industry has seen a huge uptick in cans. Guys like Bud, Miller Coors, Coke, Pepsi, when they have an increase, it's on a massive, massive scale. That certainly trickles down to making it harder for everyone else to get their product. So there's certainly been a lot of delays or a lot of uncertainty where you had that order in plenty of time and it was supposed to come by this day, but that's just not going to happen. Right now, we're at the beginning of our Oktoberfest season. So as you see those cans out in the market this year, probably about 50% of our production ended up in printed cans from the truckload that we had purchased last year. But this year's truckload just suddenly wasn't going to get here in time, and we had to make the decision to quickly order labels, and probably the second 50% of that production is now in labeled cans this year. But I kept that order in, so hopefully they can meet my deadline of June of 2021.
Have you had any other ingredient or problems, supply problems?
Not really on the raw material side. Cans are definitely the big one, and even more so 12-ounce cans than 16-ounce cans. One other thing that we're experiencing now is we did have plans to roll out a new product, like we were talking about earlier. So this was going to be the first hazy IPA that would be part of our year-round portfolio. But we're having trouble planning for that because while all the art's done for the can and everything's submitted, now we're just sort of in that waiting period of finding out when they'll even be able to produce that for us. It just makes it all that more challenging to then turn to your wholesalers and have a release plan and a marketing plan for getting that product out into the market.
And now, you were looking to open a new place, or you were planning on opening a new place in Pittsburgh. So that's, I'm assuming, been all delayed do this as well.
Yes, that's definitely been delayed as well. We did open a small tap house out there last October, but that was just a very small spot in a former pizza joint, so it doesn't really have a lot of space. We're cranking out pizzas and draft beer from there, and that's right downtown in the Point. But that's kind of just a smaller secondary location with the idea that we're going to be opening up a small brewery kind of just across the river on the other side of town. Things are still happening there, but they're just moving along at a little bit slower pace because we really don't know when everything's going to be able to open up. But it's going to be a great spot. I toured it actually back in January before this all happened, and we're going to have a small brewery there, just a 7-barrel system. But there's going to be a lot of outdoor space there as well that kind of opens up to the river. The construction on that has actually continued, so we might be able to open up later on this year, or at least have some limited events there, with the hopes that we could be brewing there at the end of this year, or maybe the first quarter of next year.
We've been talking about the business, but obviously there's people that work for the business. So, I'm assuming you had to furlough, the people at a lot of the tap rooms because you can only do 25% here. But what about at the brewery? Were they both? Did you have to take let people go?
We did for a short period of time. So once this all happened and demand was cut back tremendously, and a chunk of our business is contract as well, so all those guys suddenly pulled back and had no idea what was going on. So we did furlough a good chunk of the people, all of the packaging crew in the brewery and our sales force, but it really only lasted about 3 to 4 weeks before we were able to pull everybody back. We had applied and got some of the PPP money as well, which worked out great. When we got that money and it kicked in, also coincided when we really needed to get everybody back as well.
Good.
Luckily, we were, just able to furlough everyone and then bring them all back a short time later.
You do the beer to benefit Alex's lemonade stand, but you were doing one for the trails around here too, weren't you?
Yes, our SRTL, which we've been making for a number of years. It's a little bit more of a lighter-bodied, pale ale, even though that's not pale ales aren't necessarily the hot style now, but it's always been one of my favorite styles. It was my go-to style, way back when I started out in craft brewing, and I still really enjoy it. It's still got a ton of flavor and a really nice hop presence, but they tend to be a little bit lower in the ABV, and something that you can enjoy multiple pints of, or that's a little bit more refreshing after a day out on the trail. We partnered with them years ago, and it's been great. We do trail cleanups every spring. Typically we sponsor an event as well in Phoenixville right along the trail every year to sort of kick off that season. But we've been donating $1 per case to their efforts probably for 4 or 5 years now. And it's great because you can actually see tangible results sometimes, where people in that organization are posting photos and video of all right, these signs and these trail improvements were made, as a direct result of the contributions from Sly Fox. Something we hope to continue doing. I think a lot of our customers, a lot of the employees of the brewery are people that get out there and use the trail and use the river on a regular basis. So it's just been, sort of a natural synergy and a great cause for us to support.
What's the Pottstown, Royersford area like?
It's a great area. I think it's got a great mix of people, and it's in a great location along the trail like we were doing. So you're close enough to the city of Philadelphia that you can shoot down there and take advantage of everything that's going on down there. Visit those bars that have been poured our beer for years and years. But you're also far enough removed that it's that you've got access to the Schuylkill River to get out to French Creek Park. All kinds of different activities in that area. But it's also a great beer drinking area. I think that people in this area definitely embraced craft beer early on and have been very open to trying different things, different styles, and really appreciate the breadth of things that we're able to create at our brewery, and just a great craft beer scene. Now there's breweries popping up everywhere, obviously, but I think Philadelphia and the surrounding area was a hotbed early on, like we were talking about. All those breweries that started up in the late 90s in this area that are now 20 to 25 years old that have just been making phenomenal world-class craft beer for so long. One of the other great benefits being sort of in between that rural area of central Pennsylvania and the city is we do have the opportunity to partner with some local farmers as well. So that's another project that we've had ongoing over the years. Our production brewery is located on a strangely named road of Circle of Progress Drive. It's quite a mouthful. It's horrible when you've got to say it over the phone to someone that you're trying to buy something from for the first time, and even a little bit oxymoronic, but we've embraced it and even named a series of beers after it. That whole idea of the circle and going full circle, we've tied into working with some local farmers and local maltsters. I live nearby, about 10 miles away in Royersford, Pennsylvania, and I met a farmer there, this guy named Ned Foley, who started growing some two-row barley. I think he had it in the ground before he even had an outlet for his crop. He just was that interested in making it happen. So we've partnered with him, and his barley's been harvested and then malted by Double Eagle Malting, which is also in Montgomery County. We've then brought that in for probably do about 2 different beers throughout the year, made with that malt that's literally grown right around the corner from my house, locally grown, locally malted. And then we actually literally take the spent grain from those batches and give it back to Ned, and he turns it into compost, and it ends up on the next year's crop. So we've got this great circle where the barley goes full circle and ends up right back on the fields for the next year in Royersford.
And directly across the street, you've got this distillery.
Manitowoc Stillworks is located across the street from us, and their head distiller, Max Pfeffer, was actually originally a brewer for Sly Fox. So we partner with them as well. The very initial steps of making great whiskey are just like making great beer. So we make their wash in our brew house, then gets transported across the street where they ferment it out and distill it. We've done some great projects with them over the years as well. We've had 2 different batches where we've basically taken the malt bill from one of our IPAs and then also from our Nihilist Imperial Stout and turned them into, basically, rather than fermenting it into a beer, made it wash. And they've then distilled it and put it away in barrels. So the first of those, the Imperial Stout, came out earlier this year, right before the pandemic, of course. So we made that wash 3 years ago. It's now been aging for 3+ years in barrels over there. We rebrewed the beer and aged it in their barrels. So we had a barrel conditioned version available on draft at the exact same time that they were releasing the 3-year-old whiskey. Hopefully, coming up next year, we'll be able to have events again, and we'll break out the IPA that's probably going to be close to 4 years old.
Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think that pretty much is it.
Well, Tim, thanks for sitting down and talking with me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for coming out, Kevin. It was great.
Thanks a lot. If you'd like to learn more about Sly Fox, you can check out their website. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.